Hey, James again, Half Sun DSP, and I'm very excited to announce a brand new plugin that we have been working on, which hopefully a few of you will be really keen on. It is called the ReaperBoost1K. So let's jump right in and have a look at the features of the plugin. This is just a walkthrough. I'll give you a couple of audio examples. There are more on the website. We can go through everything that this plugin does and what it's based on, the history, and all that sort of stuff. So let's begin. The beginning of the development for this plugin was based on a need, essentially, and a lot of us that are looking for this type of sound, and hopefully by clicking on this video you may already be clued in as to what type of sound we're talking about. But basically it is the sound of an onboard preamp that used to be on a lot of old guitars. That was a very key element of the sound of Children of Bodom, Alexi Laiho, Zakk Wylde, and plenty more. And basically it is a onboard guitar preamp that had variable EQ adjustments. It had a gain boost and a few other little bits and pieces, and it was a really integral part of these sounds. And for the longest time, this particular process was always locked into hardware. So you'd have to buy the preamp in the real world, you'd have to install it into your guitar, modify your guitar, and make those changes and decide on whether or not you actually like it. And a lot of the time, with those modifications, with the actual way that this piece of equipment was initially designed, was very much a static case of you put in the guitar, you preset the EQs how you want, and you adjust the amount of gain that you want, and then you just use that. And you can have an on and off switch, and that's kind of it. A lot of the time it's an always on effect, but it's nice to have some more modern features that will help with that. So that's where the ReaperBoost1K comes in. So this is, at its core, the exact preamp that we're all looking for. As you can see from the interface here, we've got simple controls, a simple interface. The actual unit itself, in the real world, I own one. I've actually built one quite recently, so I'm really involved in the circuit, what it does, how it's built, all that sort of stuff. So being able to convert that from the real world in an actual pedal that we've got here into a plugin was really beneficial to be able to A/B them and make sure that it is the sound. So super simple interface, we've got input metering, output metering, very simple. These are the controls, or some of the controls that you would see on the original hardware, and it's very much authentic to that. So first of all, we'll go through some of the controls. We've got the boost control, which is the amount of gain on tap. It is very clear gain. It's a very specific type of gain sound, and if you're just using this as a clean boost, works really well. It interacts with the other controls, which in the real hardware it does as well, and it's got a few little quirks that make it really exciting. So skip over the peak control for right now. So back to something that the original had as well would be the main control. So your output, you can adjust how much gain is going into the pickup, or into the amp that you're pushing. Again, based on the original would have had these little dip switches, which were fine, good if you don't want to touch them and you just set it and forget. Whereas in the digital world, we've got options, and it's nice to have those options at a click of a button. So we have these different frequency selections. So basically this is the resonant peak for the EQ curve, and basically in the original hardware it would adjust by flicking the little switches. You'd be able to adjust the hardware to make sure that that resonant peak is in a place that you like the sound of. And let's face it, the majority of us that are after this sort of sound are looking for a specific sound out of it, and that specific sound is right here with a little red dot or a little red triangle. It shows you that's the setting we're all here for, at least most of us. But it is nice to have the options to go through the different frequency ranges and see what works for your pickup and your mix if you want to take it beyond the sound that people expect from it. Another thing which goes back to the lineage of the Children of Bodom sound, the key part of that is these two controls that we've added, which is a pickup emulation stage. So these are dynamic, it's not a fixed EQ, it reacts to your guitar and takes your input signal and manipulates it in a way that recreates the two pickups that this sound is super important. it recreates the sound of these pickups that were necessary for this sound. Hopefully that makes sense. But the J50BC pickup, originally by Jackson, is a very sort of quacky sounding pickup. It's relatively low output, but it has this magical interaction with this preamp and the amps that we used. And it works as this whole ecosystem of just the stars aligned for these sounds. And it created this really interesting mid-bite tone that had almost like a cocktail sound that made it really, really cutting, and it's just the sound. So you've got a pickup emulation for the J50BC, and you can bypass it by clicking on it again. You also have the more modern ALX version, which is a basically EMG HZH2 that then was fed into a preamp booster, so the ALX boost. And this pickup model sounds different. It's a little sharper on the top end. It's got a bit more of a percussive attack, and it interacts differently, and it kind of gives you the indication of where Alexi was going with his sounds, and you can hear that through the different albums. And that's a big part of it. So it's good to have that at the bass level. So basically, whatever pickup you've got in your guitar, as long as it's a humbucker, doesn't matter if it's high output, low output, you can account for all of those things. And the way that it's voiced, you can dial it in with these two models. So in addition to that, another feature that wasn't in the original, which we've added here, which I think is just a really, really good part, and it definitely helps to dial in that sound, is this peak control. So basically the peak control controls the intensity of the particular resonant peak that you've selected. So if you're in a position here that is lower on the dial, it's generally a wider, less intense sound. It still has the resonant peak like the original does, but it flattens it out a little bit and gives you a less pronounced sound. So if you don't want it to affect your tone too much, that's a good way to go. If you want to make the effect much more extreme, that's where you can increase the peak control. And basically at a sort of midpoint is where it would be on the original hardware, because you obviously don't have this control on the original, but setting it 50% will give you the original. And then beyond that gives you a really intense effect. So if you really want to make that more exaggerated and more pronounced, that's the way to do it, through the peak control. So really cool, super simple. Plugin itself is, yeah, just really, really good. It gets that sound. So we'll go through a demo of how it sounds real quick. There's more on the website. You can check them out. So as a part of this whole concept is Hearthstone DSP, we're trying to do things a little bit differently. It's not just an isolated plugin. This is a part of an ecosystem to get sounds from a certain era and a certain album, a certain band, and these sort of things. And it's giving you the tools to do that. So this plugin integrates perfectly with our Reaper suite, which we'll have a video for you to check out. So basically, the Reaper suite is what it looks like. It's doing a certain thing, but check it out. Check out that video. It explains it a lot more depth. Basically, this is the GP1000 amp, a modified version of it that would be on all the Children of Bodom recordings. And a big part of that is, what we're talking about is the magical chain. And it starts with the pickup, then it goes into the preamp, so the ReaperBoost1K, and then into the amplifier. So in this case, GP1000 that's modified. All of those need to interact in a certain way to get this sound. They don't work as individual pieces. So this is where this kind of ecosystem of, okay, every little piece is designed and has its spot in the chain and it makes a big difference, is all here. So for this example, we will go through the Black Reaper preset, which is part of this. There's a whole bunch of different album sounds from there. But this one, gain is set conservatively. In the Reaper Suite plugin, this ReaperBoost1K is integrated into it. So when the gain on the plugin is beyond 50%, the ReaperBoost is introduced and it sort of works. There's not much control over it. It's just a fixed preset of the sound that we want for that album. Whereas with the actual ReaperBoost1K, you've got control over everything. So we'll set the gain low, show you that sound on its own, and then we will engage the plugin and see what the ReaperBoost does. So let's just start here, play through a little demo song that I was creating for the ReaperBoost, which is based on a song that you may already know. So here we go. Let's just play the isolated guitar without the ReaperBoost1K. So obviously quite low gain, but this is how it would sound directly out of the guitar pickup before running into the booster. So now with the preamp on, let's play the same thing. Immediately, it's just the album sound. It just sounds like what it does. That's on the signature preset, let's say. Nothing particularly crazy on any of these settings. If you want, we'll show you what the peak effect does on this particular sound, and it'll give you an indication of how extreme you can go with it. So let's just play the same thing, and I'll adjust this. As you can hear at the extreme values, it becomes almost like a wah sound, which is very much part of the actual sound. It's just obviously a bit more subtle. So you've got the control over it, so you can use as much or as little of that as you want. Now, in terms of the boost, so the output, the Reaper Suite is designed to accept a pretty high output, and it'll still sound cool. So you can obviously cut the output if you want less. If you want more, boost it up. The boost control, it adds a certain level of distortion. It's not a whole lot, much like the original hardware. It's enough to push the front end of your amplifier. So we'll go through how much you've got on tap there. Very much musical level of distortion there, nothing too crazy. It sits perfectly. And as you can see, ReaperBoost, barely any gain. So let's go through, we'll exaggerate the peak a little bit, take a little bit of that out, and just try it again. And I'll bypass it as it's playing, and you can hear the exact effect. It makes it sound right. It makes it sound like the album, and that's really what we're after. So they're the main parts of the plugin. We've got the pickup models, but because I'm using a guitar that is very, very similar and essentially is the ALX version, won't do that one, but we'll put the JE-50 BC. It'll be a subtle change because those pickups are very similar, but let's have a listen to the emulation with the 50 BC on and off. So if you listen carefully, if you're on good studio monitors or on some nice headphones, you'll hear the upper mid-range attack change slightly, and it's very emblematic of that pickup. I had the original, and it sounds almost like a wah on the whole time. And again, the peak control does add a little bit of that too, but having this on gives you that just closer to that sound from the beginning, which is nice. So relatively subtle, but it's nice to have in there. You can always bypass it by clicking on it again. So yeah, that's a good little rundown of what the plugin does, the controls, the features. It is all ready to go. So this is the first plugin that we've released. The Reaper Suite is up next. And then after that, we have, as a part of this entire ecosystem, we have the bass Reaper as well, which will be a separate video, which will be out pretty soon, might already be out. And that's a whole different bit of this entire ecosystem to create these sounds. So thanks for watching. We've got plenty more coming up. Check it out at halfsundsp.com. See you soon.